So I just watched Ridley Scott's The Last Duel, and it is a historical piece that's also based on lives of three different people. It takes place in the 1300s, and there's this character named Jean, also this character named Jacques, and this woman named Marguerite. And Jean and Marguerite are a couple, and during this time, what happens is that he is a knight in France, and he ends up having issues with property, and he comes home from a trip from Paris, and what happens is he finds out that his wife has been raped, and and then he decides to have this duel with this person Jacques who allegedly raped his wife, and Jacques is played by Adam Driver. Jean is played by Matt Damon, and Marguerite is played by a British actress. I don't remember her name right away, but it's definitely a very well made piece. Like the editing is done very well, but nothing groundbreaking. It's very reminiscent of the film Rashomon. And those who don't remember it, it's a film about like these three prisoners who are kidnapped. Who have to stand trial. Like they're convicted of rape, of kidnapping and raping a woman, and this is a Japanese film, Rashomon. And the genius of that film was that you heard three different stories, and you had to kind of decide, who was telling the truth at the end. And it's the same thing in The Last Duel, where you spend like almost a third of the movie on Jean's story in the beginning, and like his stories that he served in the wars. He met Marguerite because her father, because he saw because he was friends with her father, and he also just knew that he can inherit property as well just by marrying her, and that he's just fighting for her honor. And Jacques' story, and that's played by Adam Driver. His story was that he was a squire for a while. He was also somebody who frequented prostitutes with his friends, and that when he didn't actually rape Marguerite, he actually went to the house. She just was enamored by him earlier. There was like exchanged looks, and that when he had sex with her, it was more of adultery type of thing, and she kind of felt kind of funny and kinky. And then we have Marguerite's story, and then in Marguerite's story, what happens is that she wasn't happy to be married. And they also did a really good metaphor of showing like how horses were treated and how women were treated. They kind of just drew like a metaphor of like women were almost treated at that time like horses, like animals. Like their purpose in life was to make babies, and be there for the husband, and then also whatever decisions they made, like their husband was away and they had a chance to run the household, it was always undermined or looked at as making things backwards. So I like the metaphor of the horse that they used. But she wasn't like too happy to be kind of like just married because her father just said it's a good business deal. And that's what happened back then. It was just more of a business deal to marry off women and stuff like that. And then the other thing that I would say is that it does show the rape scene, like how she was raped, and it does show that she did fight against her will. She was very scared and timid, and she screamed as much as she could. But she was, and also like she was asked by her husband, did you try to escape? And she said she was pinned down and stuff like that. So automatically, it doesn't make it look like she was trying to allow it to happen, or had an opportunity to not take escape. And then also, I think that one way they dropped the ball in this film is that her husband, played by Matt Damon, Jean, after learning about this, he says, I'll not let him be like the last person that had you. So he just unzips his pants, and then they cut away to the next scene. But technically, he was trying to say, because you were raped or whatever, and somebody's penis was inside of you, and violated you, I have to, as a man, do the same thing to you, just because it's a sense of just like pee last, whoever whichever dog pees last on something, that's their property, and they're marking their territory. And unfortunately, that's kind of what happened to her. But I wish they kind of show the sex and just like her psychology through that, because it would have easily just kind of made the audience kind of think about, oh well, even though Jean is defending the honor of his wife, that obviously it is a situation, very very tragically, that he's not a good guy. He's just more about his honor, and that would be that it would have really been cutting edge if they did that, but they really didn't. And then the last part of the movie is, and then one more thing about Marguerite's story is that she consistently is her husband consistently has sex with her because they want to create an heir at this time period, and I like that they kind of talked about that a lot, about the idea that women were just seen like that. It was their job to bear children. And I also kind of feel that it adds verisimilitude to her claim and her story, because it seemed like whenever she was having sex, she didn't really enjoy it. And it was also true when you saw Jean's narrative that she didn't really enjoy sex. She was kind of very disappointed because she couldn't the sex did not lead to her creating a child. So the fact that she never really enjoyed sex, and then you see Jacques' story of her enjoying the sex, it kind of makes it look like it's just like two people's stories that kind of line up a bit, and his story, which didn't actually line up. So like definitely they had more credibility, but the duel at the end was kind of very brutal. There was a lot of violence. There was a lot of them riding horses, and then the horses were getting in the way, so they end up cutting up each other's horses, and then there was an end result to it. But I really think that one thing they really encapsulated is that even though the reason why they had a duel was because she is claiming that she was being raped by Jacques, and Jacques had to fight for his honor, and Jean had to fight for the honor of his wife, because if Jean lost, what would happen is that it would be proven. It would say, okay, well, the outcome of the duel is in the hands of God. So if Jean dies, what happens is it shows that, okay, well, she bore false counsel, so she must be whipped for a long period of time and then burned at the stake. And it takes 20 minutes for somebody to burn to death. But if Jean lives and Jacques dies, she is her honor is defended. And that's that. It's not like, oh, well, feel sorry for her. It's just your honor is defended. And I also liked in Marguerite's story that that what happened was she doesn't have a good relationship with her mother-in-law, and then at the end of it, her mother-in-law was telling her that she was raped, and she learned to move on with it, and the thing that she got was to be alive, because at that time too, women were not trusted to tell the truth, and then also too, if their man just didn't want it to be a big deal, or didn't want a duel, or if they lost a duel, it would lead to the woman being punished by death by the court. She kind of just said the reason why I didn't do anything was because of my own safety and stuff like that. So it's definitely really sad, but it's also kind of really powerful, because the whole movie, you kind of thought that the mother-in-law was this big bitch, but actually she was just somebody that may have been a little bit jealous of her daughter-in-law Marguerite, because she kind of had a little defiance in her, and she had a little bit more power, but in the end it was kind of it was just a new idea to her to see a woman just have some strength, to have a little bit more strength and be a little bit more progressive. And then the film ends. There's a result. Either Jean wins or either Jacques wins, but I will not spoil it. But a couple things. So this is based off a historical event. The cinematography was really good, but it's nothing special for Ridley Scott. This is the same guy who did Alien and Blade Runner and Gladiator, so this is nothing hard for him. And he did this stereotypical orange and warm lighting inside, and then the dark blue lighting outside. So it wasn't that experimental, but obviously this is $100 million film, so they had a really good camera. They had the ability to do art production, DaVinci Resolve, all that shebang bang, which isn't like that innovatively creative. Like he just did what $100 million would look like. I think for the film that because it is a historical piece, there's really no like talk about it. It's not something like how should I kind of say like like World War II where it means so much to a lot of people that people love World War II's movies. This is a story that happened in the 1300s. So it doesn't surprise me that there wasn't a lot of interest in it. So I do kind of see why when you watch this film, it only made $10 million against $100 million budget. And then the last thing that I'll say about it is that is also like there's a lot of violence in the film, so I kind of feel like there was parts of that made me think of Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, and even like Margaret Herrick, she reminds me of like the dragon. I think the dragon queen or something in Game of Thrones. I've never watched it, but like the woman with like with a lot of blue clothing and like blonde hair, she almost kind of had something very similar going on. So it did kind of feel like dark midi. It kind of felt like it was a dark medieval story, but it was not dark fantasy or whatever. But I do kind of would say that I think that that there really was an interest in the subject matter, and I think that sometimes if we talk about injustices that have happened in history to women, I think a lot more people want to see something that happened in either the 1900s that holds some resonance, like Roe versus Wade, or just like how women were treated during the Civil Rights Movement who were African American, or something nowadays, like if the person that was raped by that piece of shit Brock Turner, if that was a film, a lot of people would watch it because it's so contemporary versus something in the late 1300s. But it's a really good piece. I think it's definitely really important because I think that it's also a good piece about a couple of issues we face nowadays. Really who to believe, because this was done so long ago and there's only like some text about it. So we don't know what actually happened. And usually with rape cases, even nowadays, there are many times where unfortunately there are people who lie about being raped. So it does kind of like allude to how some people can get away with lying about being raped if that's what happens. And then also just like the outsider, because we don't know what actually happened. And then the other part of it is that it does kind of allude to, what it's like to be a rape victim, and also just that idea of how other people like who do rape people, they can live their lives with a lie in their head and be like, okay, well, it was they were being like, they always blame the victim. They'll say like, well, the victim was into it, or it wasn't rape. It was more like that person wanted to be flirty or adulterous or lustful, and they're saying that they've been raped just to kind of make sure they don't come off as a slut. So I think it talks about that as well, and I also think it also talks about what happens with rape victims is that sometimes let's say if they have a powerful father or relative, like sometimes they may have a relative that may exploit that fact that they've gotten raped, like treat it like, okay, well, I'm getting this person arrested, I'm defending your honor, it's about me, it's my badge of honor to take the person down. So it's like it's definitely kind of like some people like to play hero when something bad happens to somebody else. This is completely irrelevant, but I'll say this. My dad ran for governor of Connecticut, and he did a commercial where he mentioned that me and my brothers had autism, and we don't have autism. Maybe one of my brothers does, but I do not, and my younger brother doesn't. He mentioned that we're all black kids, but I'm biracial, and so is my older brother. My younger brother, I believe he's African American, but it kind of came off as this, as he was kind of doing a commercial where it came off as this white guy looking out for these black kids with learning disabilities. So, obviously adopting somebody out of a bad situation, my parents being a gay couple, that took a lot of bravery and courage. But for my dad to kind of take me out of a bad situation and gave me help because I was a little behind in some areas, and did that with our other brothers, for him to kind of almost exploit it so he looks like this good guy, is kind of like there is a similarity in how some people have relatives that are victims of crimes and they go after being a hero or they go after being a celebrity. It's taking somebody's hurt and making yourself look good, and that's not okay. So I just kind of feel with this film, it does kind of talk about those three things. Just really quick, just victims of sexual assault. And this is filmed in such a way you don't know who's telling the truth, who's not telling the truth. And there's no evidence. And this has also happened over close to 700 years ago. So we have no, so there's no so it doesn't mean anything nowadays to even kind of do an investigation or be like, okay, what happened so long ago? But what I would kind of say is that again, you don't know who's telling the truth or not. So there's themes of, is she lying? And it can kind of be a film about, okay, well, this is just somebody who's an adulteress, and she wants to throw some guy under the bus to protect, to kind of almost protect her image, and that does happen to some women. They will lie about being some anybody, not just women, different genders. That does happen. Is that somebody may lie about being raped when they had sex and enjoyed it, just so they don't come off as a slut. And then also there are people who are actually raped, and then and then their rapist live a life of just in their heads, and they want society to think that, okay, well, it never happened, or the other person was lustful, or the other person wants it, and that's painful because it's you don't grasp how the other person suffered, and sometimes people get away with it, and sometimes people are good liars and they get away with it in the court system. And sometimes people are never brought to justice. So sometimes a person rapes somebody, they go home at night and just say, well, it was this thing, and it goes by my narrative, and they believe their own bullshit. And then the last thing is that, with Jean's character, avenging his wife, like I said, he's definitely a product of his time. A misogynist, saw women as property, and also saw her as, and then that's kind of what happened at that time with women, is that easy access. Once you're married, if a man wants sex, as long as it's not on your period, it's gonna happen. You were just, women were just were just sperm dumpsters, and that's what it was like back then. You were just there to make a child, or you were just there to, you're there just to fuck. And I remember, I think on Facebook they said that in the 1950s there was this book about teaching girls in high school how to be good wives. And I think what one thing in that book was saying was that it said, and I quote, which was, it doesn't matter if your man has some perverse fetish or there's something that he wants to try out that's taboo or gross. You have to go along with it because it's your womanly duties. And a lot of people believe that shit, and that's fucking sad and disgusting. You were just treated as a body, and thankfully things have changed in close to 700 years from then, and in a lot of areas of the world. There's still some places that have a long way to go, but I think this piece has a lot of talking points to it. And I think the last thing that I'll say, just to let it go, is a lot of people said this film was similar to Rashomon, and I explained it. They also said it was similar to the film Straw Dogs. And Straw Dogs, I may review it for this channel, but it's a Sam Peckinpah film. Highly controversial because there's a scene in the film where this woman is being raped, and when they do the editing of it, it kind of shows that she's smiling and she has her eyes closed, like she's enjoying how she's being fucked. And then I think what some people say, I think what Peckinpah was saying, is that sometimes rape isn't always violent because there could be an orgasm that happens to victims. And I think that when they show Jacques' story and how she kind of enjoyed it, it's a little there's some parallel to it, but I think the gist of it is this is how Jacques remembers it, or this is what Jacques' story is telling us. But I don't think that it is insinuating at all that women enjoy that women, because it really is about a woman, that women enjoy sexual assault or whatever. I don't think that this piece, The Last Duel, is insinuating that. I think it's just insinuating three different stories, but they're not going to tell you which one is true or false because nobody knows, since it was over it was close to 700 years ago. But I think this is a very, very powerful piece of 650 years ago. Let's call it that. But this is a very powerful piece. I do think that, unfortunately, I don't think this has any appeal nowadays because even though it has very contemporary themes, if this was told with a contemporary story, it would have made its $100 million plus. But they chose a story that happened so long ago that it doesn't hold relevancy. But we all know Ridley Scott likes historical dramas, but I think that there's really no market for that anymore, really. So I don't think that he should kind of be doing stuff. I think if he wanted this film to be successful, he would have chose maybe this story, but adapting it to a contemporary setting and just make it work that way.